Hello, I'm Moira Alderson with the BBC News. Washington says up to 100 Ukrainian soldiers will arrive in the US as early as next week to be trained in using the Patriot missile system. They'll undergo what's described as an expedited programme. The Pentagon press secretary is Brigadier General Patrick Ryder.
The training will prepare approximately 90 to 100 Ukrainian soldiers to operate, maintain and sustain the defensive system over a training course expected to last several months. So the training will be tailored to provide relevant tactics, techniques and procedures based on the battlefield conditions in Ukraine to enable them to employ that to maximum effect once they are back in Ukraine.
The French government has set out President Macron's delayed plans to raise the retirement age by 2 years to 64 by the end of the decade. It puts the government on a fresh collision course with French unions. 8 immediately announced strike action for next week. The Prime Minister, Elisabeth Borne, insisted the reforms were necessary to avoid the pension system racking up future deficits. The former chief financial officer of the Trump Organization has been sentenced to 5 months' imprisonment for tax evasion. Allen Weisselberg had pleaded guilty to the charges that relate to a large-scale tax fraud scheme run by the company for 15 years. From New York, here's Samira Hussein.
The sentence for Allen Weisselberg was largely predetermined after the former chief financial officer for the Trump Organization agreed to a deal last August. In return for his admission of guilt on charges of tax fraud, Mr. Weisselberg was required to pay $2 million in back taxes, waive any right to appeal, and testify in a case against the Trump Organization. That case eventually led to the conviction of 2 subsidiaries of the company owned by former President Donald Trump and his family.
Police in Western Germany have been removing climate protesters from an abandoned village that's due to be destroyed for open-cast coal mining. The demonstrators say plans to mine more lignite, the most polluting type of coal, go against German commitments to cut carbon emissions. Danny Eberhard has this report.
There were scuffles as police began breaking down barricades and dragging off climate protesters around the village of Lützerath. The demonstrators are determined to make it as difficult as possible. They've constructed tree houses, strung up hammocks between poles and taken to holes in the ground and the roofs of empty houses. The mining company owns the land and has permission to expand the giant open-cast pit. Germany's coalition government, which includes the Greens, has delayed plans to drastically reduce coal usage due to the energy crisis and its urgent need for alternatives to Russian fossil fuels.
Danny Eberhard reporting. World News from the BBC. The Southern African Regional Force fighting Islamist militants in Mozambique has opened an investigation into the possible involvement of its troops in burning corpses after the circulation on social media of a gruesome video. Mary Harper reports.
The video shows 2 men in military uniforms swing the body of a dead man and hurl it onto a burning pile. In amongst the smouldering furniture and other household items lies at least 1 other human body. A soldier approaches and pours liquid from a small plastic bottle onto the dead man. 2 other men film the scene on their mobile phones. One has a South African flag stitched onto the upper arm of his uniform. The South African National Defence Force says anyone involved in this despicable act will be brought to book.
Brazil's judicial authorities have ordered the arrest of the former Justice Minister Anderson Torres over the invasion of key government buildings on Sunday. A statement from the new Attorney General's office described him as responsible for acts and omissions leading to the unrest by supporters of the far-right former President Jair Bolsonaro. The Peruvian government's declared an overnight curfew in Puno after security forces killed at least 17 people during anti-government protests in the southern region on Monday. The violence has been described as the deadliest since President Pedro Castillo was arrested last month for trying to dissolve Congress. Up to 40 people have since been killed. The last king of Greece, Constantine II, has died at the age of 82. He had ruled his country from 1964 until the abolition of the monarchy in 1973. Forced into exile during the Second World War, he acceded to the throne on the death of his father Paul. But political instability culminated in a military coup in 1967, and he was again forced to flee. BBC News.